Hey, it's me. I am here in the kitchen in France, and I'm going to make us a little bit of a Potage Julian Darblay, which is a leek and potato soup with julienne, carrots, and leeks in it. Amazing soup. Made a believer out of Billy who didn't like cream soups before. So this is really wonderful. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with, the ingredients are super simple. We need leeks, we need potatoes, we need carrot, some chicken stock, and some cream. Salt and pepper, obviously, but that's it. So let's start out with some cutting up the leeks. And what we're gonna do, I'm gonna post the recipe in there in the group for you. And I'll make it all nice and formatted beautifully. But the first thing we're gonna do is slice the leeks. Leeks are kind of a funny thing because they often are grown in sand, right? They turn green when they're above the ground, but when they're below the ground, they're white. So they bury them in sand and cook them and grow them in sand. So the more white you get, the more value, right? Because the white is the good part. And so you can get them quite sandy. So what you always want to do with leeks when you're cutting them up or using them is you want to make sure you put them in a strainer and rinse them really well. And I know it seems weird once you cut them up to rinse them, but that's the way you have to do it. Otherwise, you're going to get the sand in your soup, and you don't want that. So I've got a very nice. I'm going to move this a little closer to the edge because then I go. Whoosh. Otherwise, they go whoosh, and they fly off onto wherever. Hopefully, that's not in the view. But we're not. We're going to cut off the bottom hairy part, obviously, and then we're going to cut up so you can see it goes white, pale green, dark green. So what you want to do is you want to sort of do it right before the first dark green leaf turns dark green, right? So you've got here's the dark green leaf. You're going to do it till right here. I know that when you look at this, you're thinking, man, leeks, you don't use a whole lot of them. And it's true, there's a lot that you throw away, but you can use it for a, like a bouquet garni, which is always nice, right? And we talked about that last month in the, Chef's Kiss cooking class, right? The date night cooking class was using a bouquet garni, and I showed you, there's a video there for you to make the bouquet garni. So these things, the leek leaves are really great for that. And the reason you only use the bottom parts, I guess I should tell you that too, is that the leaves are tough and they're not going to get untough. But we're going to use it, like when I say a little bit of the leaf, I mean a little bit of the dark green leaf. We don't want any of these hairy bits. Oh no, that's not hair. Okay. Like, I mean hair from the bottom of the leek where they grow in the ground. So, yeah, we're going to use a little tiny bit of the leaves for garnish, like the dark green stalks, and you'll see how we can make those palatable. But for now, we're going to cut these up. So I bought, I want to say, a kilo or 2 kilos of leeks from the grocery store. And that's just the bundle that they came in. So really, if you're doing this for 2 people, you probably only need 2 or 3 good sized leeks, right? And the more leek you do, the more flavor it's going to have. So a little extra leek is fine if you've got a big bunch of leeks that you're going to use, then by all means you can use that. It just gives the food a little more flavor. There we go. All right. So that's the leeks chopped up, and as I cut them up, they don't look sandy, but I can feel the sand in my hand. So you just know you have to rinse them. So I'm going to pop out. I'll be back in a sec. So I'm rinsing the leeks. Sometimes you can let them sit in a bowl of water to make sure you get all the sand from them. And that's always a good option too. If you've got time earlier in the day, shoot, I should have my microphone on. If you've got time earlier in the day, then it's always a good idea to let them soak in the water. Okay, so I have rinsed the leeks, and I'm going to use a bigger pot because I decided. So I have the pot. I'm going to turn on the burner. Here we go. I'm going to get some butter from the fridge. You can use oil for this, but butter just gives it that little bit more richness, right? Pretty sure we have butter. But it's not. There we go. So butter just gives it a little more richness. So I think butter's always a nice addition. Now in France, the butter has incredible flavor because it's a cultured butter. So it really does add to the dish. So if you have the ability to acquire cultured butter wherever you are, then it's always a really nice addition. It always just adds a little bit more flavor. It's just a better butter. So cultured butter is good. All right. So we've got the butter. We're going to melt the butter a little bit. Then we're going to add the leeks. And see all the chopped leeks. All I did was slice them, cut them in half, and then slice them. Make sure you got it all in the colander because we're going to strain. Well, we're not going to strain anything else, so this is fine. So when I say we're going to saute, we're going to sweat the leeks, which means that we want them to get cooked, we want them to be soft, but we don't want them to brown. Not the end of the world if you accidentally brown them, don't worry, but we would prefer to not have them brown when they're cooking. And one of the ways that you can make this happen is by putting the lid on. When you put the lid on, it means that the liquid does not evaporate and it sweats them. And if we were doing this with meat, I'd say never put the lid on because you don't want to boil the meat. But in this case, the keeping the moisture in and cooking it just will sweat it and makes it really kind of soft. So while we're waiting for that, I am going to... I thought I had a potato peel here. I don't think I did. I want these. I don't like these potato peelers. Just because I'm used to using the other one. Okay, so we're going to make the julienne. And the julienne is a garnish for this particular dish. So we really don't need a lot. So what we want is we want the green leaves, but sort of an inner, you know, the innermost green leaves. And we're going to cut it off to about 1.5 inches, I would say. So we have these leaves. We're going to flatten them out a bit. And we're really just, we're making a julienne, right? So we've got them laid out flat. We're going to cut them really thin. I'll show you in a sec when I'm done. So you can see that each piece is really quite thin. So we're going to use these and we're going to blanch them. And so what blanching is going to do is blanching is going to make them super tender. And you wouldn't want to use these for the soup because, for the body of the soup, because when you puree the soup, it's going to be super, super velvety and really lovely. But if you use these, you're going to notice the texture. But for the garnish, for the actual, you know, sort of visual on top, these are great. They work perfectly. So you can see, I've got a pot full of these. And normally what I do, I mean, when I make the soup, there's always leftovers, right? Because I make a big batch of them. Hold on, let's check on the progress of these guys. Oh, good. They're sauteing. Oh, you can smell them. They smell amazing. They're sauteing. They smell fabulous. But they're not browning. And part of that is because the lid is on. So we've got this pot of these. And then next we're going to take a carrot. And we're going to peel said carrot. Now, these carrots are really nice and like clean and fresh. So you don't need to peel them, and quite often I don't. But sometimes you will notice I put on my very best behavior when teaching cooking class. So I'm peeling these little guys with a peeler I really don't like. But it does a good job. It's sharp. Peels them. There we go. Okay. So when you're julienne a carrot, it's really not quite as easy. I'm going to cut it in half. You got to think about the fact that you don't want the carrot rolling around while you're trying to slice it, right? So first you take a little slice, and then you get this side, smooth side, that can lay flat. Then, once it's laying flat, you want to cut your carrot into very thin slices. You know what? I'm doing all of this. Put my glasses on. Because when I have a knife, ooh, much better. When I have a knife, I should know where my knife is going. So you've got it flattened. You want to make very thin slices, because as you can imagine, just like we did with the leeks a second ago, we're going to cut these slices into the finest of juliennes. There we go. And then you can eat the ends. Then I've got them, I've lined them up. There are never going to be quite as many carrots as there are leeks, because the leeks come automatically thin, and the carrots take a little more work. So it's almost like you don't try as hard to get as many carrots. All right. There we go. But the carrots, because they're orange, they kind of stand out, so you don't have to worry about them. They really make an impact, regardless of whether you have lots or just a couple. And some of your carrots, when you're doing this, some of them are going to just be a little bit bigger. It's not the end of the world. Because, like I said, we're going to blanch these, so they're all going to be nice and soft anyways. So that wasn't quite enough. I'm going to do this other piece of carrot. I've cut the piece off to make them flat. If you have a sharp knife when you're doing this, it really is helpful. Carrots are kind of thick, right, and solid. So a sharp knife helps you to make better slices, thinner slices. A sharp knife is really something that you want to have, and I know that most of us, and I'm no exception, so I'm not criticizing by any means, but most of us mosey through life with dull friggin' knives, and when you have a sharp knife, it's worth it. It just feels so much better. It's so much easier to accomplish the things that you're trying to accomplish. So there I am. I've cut the slices. I stack a couple slices, a couple at a time, not all at once, because it makes a slippery stack. And you can do them one at a time too if you want. Absolutely one at a time works. And look at this. Okay, so you can see in the pot, the leeks, I have actually done quite a few carrots, so that's good. So I'm just going to put a little bit of water in this pot. And I'm going to steam these, blanch them. All right. So the leeks are great. What I'm going to do, I'm going to turn those off for a moment because I don't think they need to really saute anymore. And got sidetracked with the julienne. So we've got the julienne vegetables. Put a little bit of salt in when you steam them. You're going to pour the water off, so you don't have to worry about the salt being overbearing. But you want to you want flavor, right? And if they have a little flavor, it's great. Now, we're going to cut up the potatoes. And I'll do this a couple times with the peeler. I don't like peeling potatoes with a peeler. I always use a knife because it's just easier and faster for me. But you absolutely waste less of the potato when you use a peeler. There's no question. The peelers are always so nice and sharp. They make nice potatoes. Right there. This one here. There we go. So I think I've used, I don't know, I want to say 5 leeks. Good leek stems, maybe 6. Some of them are small. And I'm going to use about the same amount of potatoes, maybe a little less, right? So if you have 5 good-sized leeks, you can use 4 potatoes. And like I said, I will put the recipe in there so you have the extra real official version with all the right amounts. Because I have a bad habit of not measuring stuff, right? I hope I'm recording this. Hopefully you can see all of me. What happens is sometimes I will set it up for recording and make sure I have the visual right, but I have it in photo and not video, and then video changes the perspective completely. So all right, look at me being a good girl peeling. Billy, I'm peeling the potatoes with a peeler.
Where'd you go?
Right? I never do that. Okay. One more to go. Maybe I should peel these in advance because you don't want to watch me peeling potatoes, but from the kitchen in France, their potatoes are all, I don't know about everywhere, but where I am, in the winter, the potatoes are really kind of dirty and, they look a little bit old. And then in the summer, we have these, which we call new potatoes. In France, they're always new potatoes. And invariably, the older potatoes are a little more starchy. The new potatoes are less starchy. But they all work beautifully here, so it's kind of nice to have. Okay. So we are cooking these potatoes in a soup. We're going to puree them. So the size of the potato doesn't matter. For me, I tend to go with smaller pieces because then they just cook quicker and they're easier to puree at the end. So cube the potatoes into whatever size you want. Just keep in mind that for cooking them, it's much better to have them a uniform shape, right? Or size. So if you want to have potatoes you know, if you want to smaller potatoes so they cook well, then that's great. Make them all small. Or if you don't mind a bigger potato and you've got time, then cut them in bigger chunks. Just make sure that, you know, you don't cut one potato into tiny chunks and the other one into big chunks, because they cook unevenly. And the problem with that is that quite often, you know, you'll grab a potato and go, oh yeah, this is cooked. And then when you go to puree it or whatever it is you're doing, mashing, whatever, some of them aren't cooked, and then you get sort of a weird texture. Not quite lumpy, but different. So when you're cutting up the potatoes, make sure that you cut uniform size. Doesn't matter what size you choose. Just make sure it is uniform. Okay. So after we get these chopped up, which will be done in a second, we're going to put these in with the leeks, which have been resting. Put all the potatoes in here. And then we want chicken stock, and we want the chicken stock to just cover the potatoes. And so I've got about 2 cups of chicken stock here. If it's not enough, I will absolutely supplement it with water, which is fine. Where'd it go? Over here. Here it goes. Okay, so I don't know how to show you this. That it'll. I'll put it down here. So it's just barely covering, but I'm going to put a little bit more water in because I want to make sure they are in fact covered and not exposed to the air. Because sometimes if you leave the potatoes exposed to the air, then the part that's up gets a little kind of waxy almost, and that's not good. So it's just covering the potato. And the reason we do it like this is because we're going to be putting cream in it later. And when we put the cream in, it dilutes the soup. So if we just have the liquid now covering the potatoes and leeks, then when it cooks, it'll be perfect, and it'll still have lots of flavor when you add that cream. So let's put this back on. Okay, and now we have the leeks and carrots, and you can see they're quite soft. The leek color is bright green, and so these are going to be a magnificent garnish. So we'll strain those. And what we can do when we strain them too is really nice, is to put them into cold water. And if you strain them and immediately put them in like a cold water bath, that stops the cooking like that, and then you don't have to worry that they're overcooked. So and that's another thing, you can do that with pasta as well. A lot of people, there's debates back and forth. Do I rinse my pasta? Do I not rinse my pasta? When you rinse pasta with cold water, it stops the cooking immediately. So if you've kind of gone a little too far, and maybe cooked your pasta a little too much, rinse it with cold water immediately, and that stops the cooking. But a lot of people also believe that leaving the starches and the starchy water on the pasta is a really great way to use the pasta in the sauce. So on the other direction, if your sauce is a little bit too runny, don't rinse the pasta. Put it in, it'll be starchy, and it'll help fortify the pasta. So, all right. So that is simmering. I'm going to put a little bit of salt. I'm not going to put the pepper in until I'm not going to put the pepper in until later. And I've got about a teaspoon of salt here that I'm going to put in. But I'll adjust the seasoning later, but I want to have a little bit of salt as this cooks. So we'll put the lid on, and we will just do a little bit of a pause here. Okay, while I'm back, I tried pushing pause, and pause did not work because I left it too long, and then it just shut down. So the soup is finished cooking. I've I've got it. Actually, I don't know that I can't reach it over here, but I'll bring it over here in a sec. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to use an immersion blender to puree the soup. You just want to make sure that the potatoes are cooked really well. If you don't have an immersion blender, you can absolutely use a plain old blender or a food processor. You want to make sure you have all of the lumps out. You want this to be a super smooth, velvety soup. Sometimes that happens. If you want to make it perfectly smooth and you're worried that you have lumps, like if you're doing it for something for company and it's supposed to be really perfect, you can absolutely run it through a strainer. Okay, I think I have every single lump out. So we're going to bring it over here. We've got some cream. Whipping cream is best. You can get away with a coffee cream or like a blend, but only if you are planning to not ever bring it to any sort of a boil, which sometimes is accidental. But the other creams, like a coffee cream or a blend, you run the risk of having the soup separate. So you want to be careful not to do that. So that's like 250 mils, a cup of cream. You don't need a lot of cream. Really the point is to make this a really thick, beautiful, silky smooth soup with just a little touch of cream at the end. And I'm going to get a spoon so I can taste this, because you have to taste test and test the seasonings. And to be honest, you're making a big mistake if you don't taste test before you do it. Magnifique. You're going to put a little pepper in. The flavor is really good. Also, you know, just a little talk. We talked about this, about the leek and potato soup. Leek and potatoes are sort of a staple in French cuisine. They go together like peanut butter and jelly. And when you have a soup that is a leek and potato soup, the generic term for it is parmentier. And just like if you have something that's sweet and sour, like we did a really nice liver, surprisingly enough, a sauteed liver, and the sauce had grapes and a little bit of vinegar, so it's sweet and sourish. That's called a gastrique. Okay, so we've got our parmentier here. Put it, I'll show you. And the dish, and to the dish we just add a few pieces of julienne carrots and leeks, and it's just meant to be tossed there. If you want to put a little bit of parsley on top of that, you absolutely can, or even some diced chives, chopped up chives. But on its own, this is how it's supposed to be. It's just a little bit of a presentation with the leeks, the julienne leeks and carrots, and then the velvety smooth soup. So this is an amazing recipe. As you can see, it's not hard to create. I am going to publish the recipe for you all, but until then, enjoy.